Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 47th of our Zoom meetings. And we're here with Holly Merker, who is our local birding expert, whom we've heard from in the spring, and now it's fall. And she's the author of Ornitherapy and has lived here for a long time and seen a lot of our birds come and go. And right now, they're more going than coming, but we'll get into that in a moment. I'd like to invite Holly to sort of help us to settle in with a little practice of attention. So, Holly.
Mm. Yeah, so take some time to gently arrive into the present moment. Begin by getting yourself comfortable in a position that allows you to feel relaxed and alert. Allowing yourself to switch from your usual mode of doing to non doing, to simply being. Invite a sense of ease and give yourself permission to just settle in. If it's comfortable for you, take in a deep breath in through the nose and exhale out through the mouth. And without trying to change your natural rhythm, follow your breath as it comes in and then out of your body. With your next exhale, inviting a sense of awareness. And with your inhale, allow your attention to drop into this present moment softly by noticing all that is in your surrounding space. Perhaps you might hear some sounds, or you might feel gentle breeze on your skin, or maybe it's even the sunshine hitting your skin or your body in some way. And now take a moment to consciously set an intention of inviting kindness and love and care for all of the wild birds in your neighborhood, thinking about the wild birds that surround us and the joy that they bring us. And bring to mind a particular bird. Perhaps it's a species of bird, or maybe it was an encounter with an individual bird that brings you a sense of joy or happiness, or maybe even a sense of belonging, a thought that is positive for you. And perhaps when you think of this experience and when this encounter, perhaps a smile spreads across your face, or perhaps a gentle feeling of warmth arises for you. Whatever surfaces, recognize that and know that you can return to this special bird, this special memory, and experience these feelings again. Shifting your awareness back into the breath. If it feels right, take a deep, full breath in through the nose and then release again out through the mouth, letting it go, letting some of the tension your body might be holding just out of your body, releasing. Give it permission to just leave. And now come back into the present moment, recognizing that you are not alone in this practice, that we are held together in community, all of us brought together by the birds.
That's a great thought, brought together by the birds.
Mm.
That's what we're up to with our conversation. It's bringing ourselves together, pulling ourselves together sometimes, you know? Um, so when we're doing these weekly meetings live, we ask people how the practice was for them. And since we can't do that, I want to talk a little bit about my experience.
Mm.
And so I sort of, if you were watching this on YouTube or something, you might have seen me sort of move back and settle in and relax. And so that really happened. I really sort of shifted how I was.
Mm.
And your prompt for a bird, I thought of several. I drink my coffee every morning that it's possible on our little tiny screened in porch, and which has our bird feeders on one side and so many bushes and shrubs and things on the other side. And it's just full of birds. And so encounters galore, but the ones that stand out for me sort of from this summer really into fall were with four catbirds. We had two pairs of catbirds that nested somewhere in our backyard. And
Yeah.
then the wrens, and they are my favorite bird, I have to say. This is the Carolina wrens, but we also had some, whichever ones the regular ones are that aren't from out of
Oh.
state. So, yeah.
Mhm.
And so just such fantastic talkers and singers. They have so many ways that they express themselves, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, it just knocks me out because I'll think, now wait a minute, I've never heard that before. And then I'll look over and it's like, wait, what was that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that did what you said. That brought me joy. That
Mm.
brought me a real sense of, just being taken out of myself and into that bird song.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And in
something.
thinking about your bird neighbors, I loved hearing about your bird neighbors there that you have spend time with while you're drinking your coffee and surround us. And thinking about those birds, it brings me joy to hear your experience with them too. And I think that's kind of a fun thing. It's that birds can be our common language. When we meet another person that loves birds, we can talk about them. And just even hearing you talk about that, that made me feel good. And I think that a lot of people could probably relate to that hearing your experience, Don. So thank
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I have to say, one of the reasons that birding is kind of high on our list for activities to do with the kids
you. Hmm.
that put us in a place where we're together and we are having emotions, so we remember what's going on. We remember bad things because of the emotions around them, and we remember the good things because of the emotions around them too. And
Yeah.
so, as we're learning about emotions as a child, to learn about them in that kind of a situation and how to feel them and how to recognize them when
Mm.
they're positive is really, like part of what we're trying to do with learning life skills together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the neat thing about birds is that they can give us those moments to kind of put aside all of our busy mind, our kind of worries or whatever's going on in our lives and allow us this time to restore, to recharge, and really change our mental channel. And I think especially for young people, for young minds, learning these skills at such a young age can be beneficial so that they know of an easy way. This is a practice we could do almost anywhere, right? When we think about it,
Yeah.
right? And it's accessible. But even just being able to go outside and focus on something other than ourselves, maybe perhaps we're going to even experience awe while we're doing that. And we know that that is really powerful in helping our minds and our bodies. But this is one of the gifts that birds give us is this opportunity to connect. And they can be companions. Like they're your coffee clutch in the morning, right? They're your coffee drink.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, and they can be there for us during the good times and the bad times, and especially bring us that sort of comfort in knowing that there, the world is still going on around us, and we do know that that bird song that you referenced is really good at being able to mitigate or kind of offset some of the feelings of anxiety. That there are now numerous studies that suggest that just being surrounded by birdsong, and you don't have to know what birds are singing, but just
Right. Yeah.
surrounded by it helps our
Yeah.
minds, right? It interrupts negative thinking loops. It allows us to experience less anxiety. And so in thinking about that, I think that's something also to keep in mind. Oh, there's studies out there that suggest that we can learn if we're listening to birdsong as we're learning or studying for a test, or perhaps we're trying to learn something new, we are able to retain that information longer and recall it quicker, which is really fantastic. And it gets
Yeah.
into thinking about, well, why is that? And it's because as animals ourselves, our minds are kind of hardwired to interpret the bird song, to understand that when a bird is singing, that bird is not feeling threatened by anything, predators or other threats in their immediate environment. And we recognize that, which is really cool when we think about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they benefit us in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole sense of when we're hearing bird song, it means that we're safe in
Hmm.
in nature,
Hmm.
There's nothing threatening us. Yeah, so it's certainly no wonder that we can learn better. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
sort of joy that comes along with that,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it
just
is.
wonderful. And so the more we're paying attention to ourselves, sort of back to that idea that this is a practice of attention,
Hmm.
the more that we can pay attention and see what's actually going on, the more we participate in that. It's the same thing with being in nature, whether there are birds around or not. When we're looking into it, when we're doing something really simple like looking at the tree, I mean, which could be in the middle of the city, it's fine, it's nature, there it is,
Absolutely.
and say, what's moving right now?
Hmm.
See the parts that are moving and the parts that aren't. That does that thing of taking us out of ourselves that the
Hmm.
bird song does and that the birds themselves do. It's just, well, learning life skills together pushes going for a walk
Yeah.
and looking at the birds and all
Mhm.
those really simple things that the other thing I have to mention is it doesn't take a long time.
Right,
Right?
exactly.
You go out and sip your coffee for 5 minutes and get in the car and go to work like I do. It's a shift, it's a setup, it's all those things for and
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's not a whole lot of investment in it on our part. Like you said,
yeah,
you don't have to invest a lot of time. You don't need fancy equipment, right? You don't need binoculars. You don't need to have any special skill set in order to notice and pay attention. And that's one of the fun things about birds is that they gift us that kind of ability to turn our attention to something else and be more in the present moment. And in doing that, sort of allows all of these things going on in our lives to just kind of fade into the background as we turn our attention and we notice. And so birds just constantly they're charismatic and they really put on a show if we're open to paying attention to what we're noticing around us. And I think it's really fun to this just right before I hopped on this call with you. I always look at outside. I have bird feeder set up. And I noticed that three mourning doves were huddled up together, just sitting quietly. They had this beautiful gentleness to them. And it made me
Mm.
feel relaxed seeing them relax. They were kind of in the sun and the light was just shining on them. It was like shimmering off of their feathers. And they just looked so sweet, the three of them together. And I thought, what is that relationship? Are they, are two a mated pair? Were they in the same nest together? Like I just start
Mm.
wondering about their lives. And that's the cool thing is that it invites a sort of curiosity when we start paying attention. You start to wonder and think about these birds like they're your neighbors, right? And you start to be curious and it is. It's such a joy to be able to take that time. And it doesn't take much time, right? So,
No, it sure doesn't. And I will say that nothing that we offer in learning life skills together takes a lot of time. The program itself is in 5-minute chunks. So we're not asking for devotion. We're asking for just just a moment here and a moment there. And they do add up for us. And they
mhm,
add up for our kids too. That's the important part. Yeah. So we're talking about this attention part of this, and there's 4 skills that we're talking about in this program. And the next one is working with our emotions,
mm,
regulating ourselves, calming ourselves. And we've sort of been talking about that, how stepping outside, how looking at birds, how watching the leaves in the tree move, can help us to shift ourselves a bit. And sometimes it's more difficult, and that's where we get tripped up and we need to sort of know some things about ourselves and how we work and how emotions work. And as adults, essentially we know those things. We might not have analyzed them. We might not be able to talk about them the way, a psychologist would or something like that. But we do have a sense of how we work, you
mhm,
and that's really all that's necessary. It's not, the analysis of it, the pulling it apart, yeah, not that interesting. But we know that there are things that help us. And so one of the ones that we talk about a lot in emotion regulation is name it to tame it.
mm,
Because when we bring that part of our mind, into play, the part that puts labels on things, that puts words to things, it helps to calm us down.
mhm,
It shows us that there's a world that's regular, even though we feel irregular at the time. It says, no, 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 there's order here. That's okay. And it literally calms our brain when we're able to do that.
mm, mhm.
So anybody who's interested in that can listen to our program. There is what is called the handy model of the brain, which I won't do for you now, although I'm tempted. But you can go check it out, and it shows you just how it is that being able to think of how am I feeling right now? What is that feeling? And maybe it has a name, and maybe I have to use words to describe it. Whatever it is, I start to settle out and feel better and calm myself down. And
Mm.
so I think that's another sort of piece that fits into this birding thing. I'm not sure what you're thinking, but yeah, there's
Yeah.
this idea of turning on that part of your brain that
Mm.
is remembering things, using language, talking to other people about things.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the one of the wonderful things about birds is that they invite community, as you're saying, talking to other people, and we can tap into our feelings. they feel very accessible during these moments when we're watching birds because we can experience, feelings of joy, or perhaps we're maybe we might even feel something like frustration if we can't get a good enough look at a bird, right? I mean,
Yeah.
okay too. And so there's a lot of different things that can surface for us, but yeah, it is definitely something that I feel when we're looking at birds, and we can even perhaps we might even give them a name, or we might try to find the identification of that bird, and that might be something that brings us joy, right? Because
Yeah.
solve the puzzle because we're
Yeah.
figuring something out and building on cognitive skills in that way. And so
Yeah.
that can be very rewarding, because then we get to know the bird a little better, and we get to know them in the way they're moving, and perhaps maybe with the patterns that they might have with their feathers, or in other various ways. So it is part of the fun of it.
Yeah, so it's that whole thing of, we can analyze, like I was saying, with our emotions and everything, or we can experience them just the way we do it. I love that about the conversation so far, is it's not how many birds do you know, or how
Right.
many species have you seen. That's not what we're talking about. And that's
Exactly.
that's very cool, I think. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, it's just getting to know the birds right outside your own windows and doors that can be incredibly rewarding. And I always see it like an outdoor classroom, which is exciting for me when I think about it from that perspective, and what I can learn about what signs of the season I'm seeing. You're noticing all of these leaves coming down. We're talking about birds, and they become a little easier to see because, as you were mentioning, with the leaves falling, then they don't have as much cover, so to speak. So we can find them easier with our eyes. And at this time of year, it's really exciting because a lot of the birds that feed on the ground start visiting us for winter, like our white-throated sparrows or our dark-eyed juncos, who have spent their summertime maybe as far north as Canada, but then they're spending their winters here with us in Pennsylvania, in Chester County. And it's always great to see those returning visitors.
Mm,
They feel like family to me when I first see them in my yard. I hear them singing, or perhaps because the white-throated sparrows will sing when they arrive.
yeah, yeah,
It fills
indeed.
me up. It's like, oh, my friend is back. And but it's great though, a great time of year to be looking for birds because I feel they're easier to see because they're not, way at the top of a tree, or, it seems like the birds come down because really this goes along with the whole concert of the natural world. There aren't as many insects out there at this time of year, right? Or we're going into a season
Right.
with winter. And so, you're going to find birds that are looking for insects under leaves. So you're going to see perhaps it's cardinals, or you're going to see the sparrows, or maybe it's an eastern towhee scratching under, leaves, and they're looking for little grubs, or they're looking for little insects. And that's kind of cool too, because you can see them more easily at this time of year. Or something I love to do at dusk is to just step outside and watch the robins flying over. Oftentimes you'll see a lot of birds flying over at dusk, and this is a fun thing to do, is just give yourself a few minutes before the sun sets when it's still light out that you can see, but you'll watch these silhouettes of like so many birds flying over. And a lot of them, particularly our American robins, are going to what we call communal roost. So they'll all spend the night together in, a group of trees or a stand of trees, which is really cool to think about, that they're working together, they're finding community just like we do. I mean, birds are not that much different than people when we start really looking at their lives and understanding what their lives are about, which really is kind of fun to think about.
Yeah, yeah. So we're kind of back to that community and communication part of it. So the birds silent when they're in those roosts, or are they talking to each other? I would like to know.
Yeah, so they are so they might not be singing. Some of them might sing occasionally. You'll get like maybe a male robin that feels inspired to sing for some reason. But in general, they're making different kinds of calls. So, at this time of year, we're not going to hear as much bird song. So I was talking about bird song and the benefits
Right.
song. And something to keep in mind is that even though we might not be hearing birds right outside our own windows at this time of year, perhaps even putting on a Spotify or YouTube recording of bird song just to bring that in, especially I think if you are affected by seasonal affective disorder, when
Mm.
the darker days and the shorter days,
I
you know, maybe putting on some birdsong is part of your strategy of kind of lifting your mood. But yeah, the birds shift in their vocalizations. So if you were to go to that robin roost, you probably hear them doing a lot of clucking, communication calls, companion calls is another word for it. It's sort of like, I'm here, where are you? These types of
yeah.
calls. And so birds really are communicating with each other. We may not always understand what they're saying in their language. It's just like if we went to another country that we had never been to, we wouldn't recognize, but we might be able to understand a little bit about what people are saying by their body language or the cadence or how they're saying something. And it's the same thing with birds. Their language is really complicated and complex, and it's really neat to be around them and to learn to pay attention. We can learn a lot about what's going on in our environment just by listening to the birds. And we don't have to know who they are. We don't have to name them by name, their official name by field guide standards. But we can, you or I, anybody can do this just by paying attention, which is really cool.
Well, thank you for that. And so we have attention, we have emotion regulation. So that whole using our mind to help us calm down, that, name it to tame it idea, I think is really, um, tied in somehow in this practice, if it's a practice of watching the birds, being with, I like to think of it as just being with them, but that's because I'm in this little tiny screened in porch and they're all around me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
love that.
yeah, so the next skill is, I like to think of it as getting through tough times. It's like things are not going perfectly for me, and I don't see that they're gonna change for a little while. And that's something that you have to learn to cope with. You have to figure that out. And so that's where our kids really start to have trouble. Like emotion regulation, yeah, we can start to make some headway in that. But, most of us adults are still trying to work on that. How do I get through the tough times in my life that aren't just moments, but that go on? And so I'm just going to ask you, as an ornitherapist, somebody who looks at what birds can offer, how do you see that with this whole concept of spending 5 minutes with the birds, or more? It's nice
Yeah.
it's nice to go for a day or a half day and have lunch, and that
Mhm.
thing as well. But
Yeah, well, like I was saying before, they allow us, if we just even take 5 minutes just to and give ourselves permission. I think we're really not good about gifting ourselves permission to practice self-care. And that's how I see this, is if we're spending time with the birds, it's part of our self-care regimen, right? And so when we do that, when we're turning our attention to birds and we're noticing and we're kind of having this sort of conversation and we're inviting wonder and curiosity, it allows us to redirect our minds. It allows us to just kind of detach a little bit from our busy lives, and especially when things are rough and tough. And for me, this personally has been really inspirational in finding grounding amidst, really difficult times in life when I was going through some healthcare crises. When I was a young mom, I was diagnosed with cancer, and it really impacted, not just my physical well-being, but also my mental well-being, and particularly because that made it that much more challenging to be what I thought was a good mom for my two little boys at the time. And but birds allowed me that sort of escape, if you will, and allowed me that ability to kind of be in the present moment and not worry so much about, what had happened or what was going on, or even the what was going to happen or what wouldn't happen in the future. It was more about being in that present moment. And I think that's one of the gifts that birds gently guide us into these moments where we could just be ourselves. The birds aren't judging us for what's going on in our lives. We can find that sense of non-judgmental kind of attitude, and it allows us to center and get our minds off of things that are really tough in life. And I think that that's really important to recognize. And I feel a lot of gratitude for them because of that, because
Yeah.
that's something that I was able to tap into during that really, really challenging time, and thereafter as well. And so these are things that we can do when we're in these difficult periods of life or super challenging ones that a lot of people go through, is just to allow yourself to gift yourself some of that time to practice that self-care and sometimes bring somebody else with you on your
Well,
journey.
yeah,
Yeah, bring
yeah. I
somebody
mean,
else.
this is the thing is that this is a gift to our kids.
Yes.
Whether we're their parent or we're caring for them for the moment or whatever it happens to be, to get them going in that way, both with birding, which is just so accessible. So with birding and just with the idea of I can take a moment out for myself.
Hmm.
I mean, and sometimes it's really hard. Things have been crazy for me lately, and I haven't been able to really even go for a decent walk. But I
Hmm.
can still sit on that porch for 5 minutes before I leap into the car and go off and, do the next thing
Yeah.
and be with the birds. And
Mm.
that's, I mean, it's important. It's important to have something that's a go-to, you know
Yeah.
and I just think they're great. And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about just gifting yourself that time is that you can do that wherever you are. I mean, we think of birding and we think you put your shorts on and your broad-brimmed hat and your binoculars and you go off for the day and all this kind of stuff. And it's not that at all. And you
Right.
don't even have to like the out of doors to be involved with birds. Through your window is a fabulous way of
Hmm.
being with the birds. Just like I was saying, you're in the city, there's a tree. Who's in the tree? What's
Hmm.
going on? It's not a requirement that we be all, I don't even know what it would be, but we certainly are not all the same. And
Right.
very few of us wear giant shorts and big hats,
Right. Yeah.
who like
Yeah.
birds. So a very small part of the birding population. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always say just be yourself, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you don't need a whole lot of equipment. You don't need to conform to some model in order to be a birder. If you like to watch birds, you're a birder. If you find some joy in that, that is, a wonderful thing, and you are a birder. And it's something that I like to remind people that we can access birds anywhere, anytime, and they're so equitable. I think we've talked about this before, but like you're saying, they are in every habitat that humans are in, which is unlike other forms of wildlife, right? And
Yeah.
because they fly and because they are used to being around people, particularly when we do have, even in cityscapes, we have little pocket parks, or some birds are super adapted, especially in cities, and it makes it easier to spend time with them because they approach humans more closely because they're used to humans, right? And
Yeah.
habitat isn't really limiting our ability to find or connect to birds, and that's something that's really I think makes them a little bit more equitable and tangible, and another being out there that we can embrace and get to know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things that I always think about city birds and city birding is that people just sort of hear that and they're like, "Oh, you watch pigeons and sparrows," and it's like, no, there are dramatic birds in the city.
There sure
There are
are.
big birds in the city doing dramatic things if you look up. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Lots of warblers and thrushes, particularly during migration. And these are colorful birds that we look hard for, even in the suburbs, right?
yeah.
They end up in the little pocket parks. Anywhere there's a little bit of green space, or perhaps it's a little stream moving through. There have been some really neat birds, particularly seen in the city of Philadelphia, in some of the pocket parks, and people have come from all over to see these birds. It's pretty exciting
Wow.
to
Yeah.
see. Yeah, even last there was a little saw-whet owl that ended up on this little urban corner down in, Center City, Philadelphia, that people came from everywhere to see. Because that's the thing. It's almost like the city can be magical in that way. And so a lot of our cities, yes, they have a lot of pigeons. They might have a lot of starlings, European starlings, and house sparrows. But some of those birds are super charismatic, when we start to really pay attention to them, and we can learn a lot, and you can notice the different colors or
Yeah.
patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I shouldn't say this probably. I am a fan of starlings.
me too.
Yeah, they are really fun to watch and watch when they're together. And
Yes.
I will say that their name, Little Stars,
Mhm.
when you look at them, when you observe them closely, you see the little stars twinkling all over them.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
are really fun.
They
So,
are.
so there you go, all you starling haters.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they can be absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Mm.
So, well, this has been a great conversation. I think we covered the four skills of attention, emotion regulation, and tolerating those difficult times, and how that has to do with birding, maybe how we can learn and deepen those skills. And then finally, the one of communication, effective communication, which I think we've been doing, at least I hope we have. And so, as we sort of draw ourselves to a close here, I always ask the guests, as you probably remember, for a word of wisdom. So, Holly, a word of wisdom for a fall of birding.
Oh, a word of wisdom is um does it has to be one word, Dawn, or does
No,
it
no, 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 that would be a watchword, and
Oh,
I'll accept a watchword, but a word of wisdom is definitely a sentence.
yeah. Well, I would say pay attention to patterns at this time of year. And that could be patterns of movement in the sky, whether we see like these, like I was mentioning, these strings of blackbirds flying over, or robins, whether that's be that the V shape of the geese as they move over, and they're heading south as well, coming from far north. So paying attention to those patterns that you might notice when you step outside, and see what you can discover when you start to pay attention, and you give yourself that time again, give yourself permission to do this. I think you'll be surprised by what you see.
Yeah. All right. Well, Holly, thank you so much. This has been really fun, and I hope it's been fun for those who are listening. So, until next time, Holly, I was really happy to get you back on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, John, and I'm so glad to be able to share my passion and joy of birding with you and your listeners. So happy birding.